History in Havana on a special edition of The World. I'm Carol Hills. A sitting U.S. president is in Cuba for the first time in decades. But some Cuban dissidents didn't want President Obama to come. This one protested, and Cuban authorities made him pay the price.
They are pushing, in my case, they break one of my finger. They have been doing this kind of thing frequently.
Yet in Miami, some Cuban Americans think it's good the president is there, as long as he delivers this message to the Cuban people.
It's up to them to bring the changes about in Cuba. And that what they have to do is to understand that the state should work for them and not they working for the state.
The president's trip to Cuba, that's ahead on The World. Historic scenes and sounds in Cuba today on the first full day of President Obama's visit to Havana. Obama paid a formal visit to Havana's Revolution Square to lay a wreath at the tomb of a Cuban independence hero. Hard to imagine that even just a couple of years ago. Then the president held a joint press conference with Cuban leader Raul Castro, as I heard from my BBC colleague in Havana, Will Grant.
That joint press conference was absolutely extraordinary for those of us who are normally based here. We've never seen something like that, where Raul Castro is prepared to take questions from the gathered journalists. And you could see that he was very uncomfortable in doing that. He was fiddling with his earphones. He wasn't prepared to admit that Cuba had political prisoners of any description. He said that if a list was given to him, they'd be released by the evening. So he was in combative mood. But it was a very, very interesting event just to see the two men stand side by side, and of course it came after all of that symbolism earlier in the day where President Obama laid a wreath at the memorial for José Martí, Cuba's independence hero.
Were Cuban journalists able to ask Raul Castro questions, or just the foreign press?
No, there was a Cuban journalist asking questions too, but that tends to be a bit of a softball for President Castro. He tends to get the question he's expecting. But beyond that, it was just very, very interesting to see him address the world's press, to take that step, which we understand was encouraged by the Americans, to talk to the gathered media, because obviously there's so many people who've come here, and the US media directed 2 or 3 questions to him, and he certainly, I don't think, will be doing it again in a hurry.
And what was Obama's message at this press conference?
Well, in a sense, both men were trying to underline just how much ground they've covered over the past 15 months, but also how much still separates them, specifically on human rights and democracy. So President Castro spoke about Guantanamo Bay, about the U.S. economic embargo on Cuba, and understandably, President Barack Obama said that more can be done in Cuba on freedom of speech and human rights. We know that these are the positions of the two governments, but they were also at pains to show how far they'd come, and there was a mention of everything really, from the reinstating of direct mail between the two countries to the fact that there are going to be so many more commercial flights coming to Cuba from the United States. So I think there was a mixture really of positive, of optimism, but also realism in there too. They know that they remain very, very far apart on a lot of key questions.
We're going to be hearing from a dissident in just a minute, and I'm curious what you've been hearing from ordinary Cubans about Obama's visit.
Well, by and large, they welcome it. I don't think anyone could deny that they don't. This is something that's been decades in the waiting. So many Cubans never thought they'd live to see the day. So that the fact that the serving U.S. president is finally on the island is a moment of great excitement for most Cubans. I'm sure the dissident community are angry about certain moments of this visit, that they don't feel that they've been properly represented. But by and large, most Cubans aren't dissidents, and they're simply celebrating the fact that President Obama and President Castro appear to have been able to turn a page on some of the worst moments of their shared history.
The BBC's Will Grant in Havana. Thanks so much, Will.
Very welcome.
Cuban officials don't appear to be relaxing their ban on anti-government marches or rallies during Obama's visit. Yesterday, just before the president landed in Havana, a group of dissidents put that to a test. They gathered at a church in a suburb of Havana called Miramar. Cuban authorities cracked down even as foreign reporters looked on. Police detained several dissidents.